Are your ad campaigns lighting up the dashboard, but not the pipeline? That's bull spend, and marketers are calling it out in Dashboard Confessions.
My boss asked for results, so I opened my dashboard for the only positive-sounding metric I had: impressions.
Cut the bull spend. See revenue, not just reach. LinkedIn delivers the highest return on ad spend of major ad networks. Advertise on LinkedIn. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a $250 credit. Go to linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome to the AIQ podcast. I am your host, Cathy Hackl. In this limited series podcast, we help you up-level your AIQ. We bring guest interviews to you so that you can learn from the professionals that are creating the generative AI revolution. And with each episode, we ask our interviewees for special golden nuggets or best practices so that you can take those with you into your workday. In the second episode, we will be talking to Sainsbury-Carter, Corporate Vice President at Microsoft Advertising. But before we go to the interview, I want to talk a little bit about how AI, especially generative AI, is slowly changing the advertising industry. Some of you might have come across articles lately that talk about how generative AI is fueling a new era of product placement, with realistic-looking shampoo bottles and seltzer cans popping up on videos across TikTok and YouTube from digital creators. And my question is it ushering in a new form of old advertising? That was one of the questions I saw in the New York Times. And I kept thinking about that. Product placement has been around for a very, very long time and has been used across movies, TV, radio, and everything in between. So it got me thinking, how is generative AI impacting something that's been done for a very long time in the advertising industry? At the end of the day, it is about these new technologies, especially generative AI in this case, accelerating change and making it easier for creators and for brands to add content, to create content, and to change content that has already been created. And is this becoming slowly a new revenue stream for creators? There's a lot to ponder here when it comes to how advertising is being changed by technology, and specifically generative AI in the last year and a half. As we look towards the future of advertising, the landscape seems at sometimes uncertain. But what I do think is that after this interview, you'll understand how maybe advertising is actually getting supercharged and it is changing and helping consumers make decisions faster, and how generative AI is also helping small businesses and advertisers connect with consumers in new ways, helping them make better decisions.
This message is brought to you by Warner Brothers Discovery Advertising. And this is more than an ad. This is an invitation to be part of the stories the world can't stop watching, to connect with moments that dominate the conversation, to participate in culture, not just advertise around it. With the most sought-after IP, passionate audiences, and an advanced AI-powered foundation, WBD Advertising transforms attention into influence and impressions into outcomes. This is innovation. This is impact. This is opportunity. This is Warner Brothers Discovery Advertising. Visit advertising.wbd.com to learn more.
Are your ad campaigns lighting up the dashboard, but not the pipeline? That's bull spend, and marketers are calling it out in Dashboard Confessions.
My boss asked for results, so I opened my dashboard for the only positive-sounding metric I had: impressions.
Cut the bull spend. See revenue, not just reach. LinkedIn delivers the highest return on ad spend of major ad networks. Advertise on LinkedIn. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a $250 credit. Go to linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
So now, let's go to the interview. So for this second episode of AIQ, we are joined by Sainsbury-Carter, Corporate Vice President at Microsoft Advertising. Kaya, welcome to AIQ.
Thank you so much. I am thrilled to be here.
Fantastic. And for folks that haven't come across your name, can you tell folks a little bit more about who you are and what you do at Microsoft?
Yeah, definitely. So I run Microsoft Advertising, which is the monetization arm of the company, with the exception of LinkedIn. So that's kind of the short version. We run advertising across all the rest of the properties within Microsoft where we have advertising, and as well as our ad tech.
It seems like we've been hearing a lot about Microsoft advertising and certainly Microsoft in the past year. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. The generative AI conversation really propelled us, I'd say, back into the spotlight after we announced our partnership with Netflix in 2022. But I think it's super important to talk a little bit about our story, which is much broader than those two recent touch points. And I should have mentioned earlier, I've been at the company in ads for over 17 years. So I've been a part of the story, not the whole time, but for a long time in our history in ads. So, know where all bodies are buried. And, we've been really, I'd say, reimagining our advertising business, which has been around for a very long time, really from the bottom up to ensure that we're not just meeting, but of course exceeding, what are the evolving needs of the ecosystem to help advertisers and publishers reach their target audiences and to create great experiences for consumers. To do that, we've expanded our offerings quite far beyond search, which I would say we've been more recently known for. With things like advanced audience targeting, retail media acceleration, the evolution, into a global programmatic advertising marketplace. Then we reinvented the very nature of search with the new AI-powered Bing, which is now called Copilot in Bing. We're partnering with some of the world's top publishers like Snap, Baidu, Axel Springer to power their chat ads. And we're doing that on top of really what no other company has, which is the ability to bring together the power of an established scaled search business, a social business network, a gaming platform, a news publisher, an operating system, a browser, with an end-to-end tech stack, including native display, video, CTV, and retail media. And so we have really elevated what we can offer that sits across this incredibly unique set of surface areas and audiences, and being able to put those surface areas and audiences to work across this omni-channel, multi-format global business. And so we're just super pumped about continuing to evolve in value for our clients and partners. We're continuing to innovate and invest. And certainly to invest in how we make things happen through the power of generative AI, as getting back to sort of the topic at hand on how do we bring all of that to life in the fastest way possible, in the way that drives the most efficiency, and the way that helps upend ways of doing things that creates value through the power of generative AI.
And I definitely want to dig deep into, the generative AI conversation, obviously, and it's nothing new at Microsoft. It's been integrated into Microsoft products, like Microsoft Dynamics, Windows itself, Teams, and other platforms. But obviously, things really popped and boomed in 2023. I can only imagine how busy you were. But what is Microsoft advertising doing in this space? If we can dig a little bit deeper into that, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, well, first, to your point, Microsoft has been deeply invested in AI research for really more than 30 years. And so we're not new at this, but the partnership with OpenAI did really bring a different level of understanding and attention to that work. And the partnership with OpenAI to really collaborate on the development of artificial intelligence technologies, with the aim of advancing development of AI systems and bringing AI to more people, has been, sort of a icing on top of this cake that has existed for a really long time. It also enables Microsoft's investment in OpenAI, enables OpenAI to use Microsoft Azure as its preferred cloud platform, and to tap into these really vast resources at Microsoft to accelerate its research. So then, taking that into okay, what are we doing in Microsoft advertising? We've been making investments in generative AI with really a focus on harnessing the power of the technology to unlock value for our three primary stakeholder groups. So that's consumers, that's advertisers and the agencies that they work with, and that's publishers. And so I'll just share, a few specific examples. Of course, as I'm sure you are very deep in, this is ever changing, constantly day to day. But specifically, we are focused on creating more engaging experiences for consumers, really making sure that we're empowering everyone across the ecosystem to achieve more through efficiency, through performance, et cetera, and making sure that we're creating opportunities for publishers to monetize their audiences in ways that are very creative, but also custom to the way that they want to engage with their audiences. So those are kind of the three focus areas. Yeah. So a few examples and proof points here. One on the consumer side, we've created a completely new category of ad experience formats called conversational ads. And these are inspired by the Copilot experience and what we are seeing in terms of what consumers are doing in chat. What are they talking about? What are they asking for? And what would then be a valuable and relevant advertising experience in the context of a conversation versus as the result of a query. So that's an area that we're working on. We have one ad format that we're working on there called compare and decide ads. But in general, we're looking to really mine the consumer, I'd say the consumer behavior and what consumers are telling us they want, and then to bring good engaging experiences to them. Another example, I mentioned that we're working with Snapchat, Axel Springer, and Baidu. That is through an API that we built out very quickly last year after we launched what is now Copilot in Bing, called the Chat Ads API. And we provide that to publishers, apps, online services, to give them the ability, what if they decide that chat is an important experience for their site, the ability to then monetize that. And chat is expensive, and so being able to offset that expense with monetization immediately is really important. So for publishers who are excited to provide that experience, we feel great about being able to provide them with a solution, and we'll continue to take feedback and iterate there. We also have announced our first Copilot designed specifically for advertisers. So that's a Copilot that's integrated into the Microsoft advertising platform. And this is really a real-time assistant, by your side 24/7, guiding you through best practices, how-tos, support for your advertising goals, campaign setup, optimization, creative development, et cetera. And so this is an ever-evolving tool in terms of getting feedback from SMBs to create, friction-free engagement or lower friction engagement, as well as larger advertisers in terms of what makes sense for them. And then the last example I'll share, which is kind of hot off the presses, is that we've integrated.
Oh, that's exciting.
I mean, maybe in the last 2 weeks. So you may
in the last 2 weeks, but hey, I'm still going to get excited. It's okay.
Okay, perfect. Is that we've integrated our AI technology into our retail media platform. We launched something called the Retail Media Creative Studio that is really about supercharging creativity and productivity for retailers in the retail media space. We've been getting super great feedback there. We're really pumped to figure out how do we extend the potential of the creative studio concept. And so, we're trying to hit it at a lot of angles, get a lot of feedback, and recognize that we have a lot to offer, but we need to offer it in the context of what the needs are. And so taking a lot of feedback and having a lot of engagement with the market as well.
So I love that you mentioned, the different segments, right? And you mentioned Snapchat and Axel Springer and Baidu and how you're working with them. Can you tell us more about the value that this is bringing to the advertising ecosystem when you're, partnering with these companies to create these opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been a year since we launched Copilot. We've had over 5 billion chats to date. So a lot of chat activity.
A lot of chatting, yeah.
I mean, I will say
Chatty Cathy's.
Exactly. I've added, that's a good one. I've added a lot of chats myself to the party. But, through all of that volume, we're learning just so much about how consumer behavior is changing in light of new generative AI-driven experiences like Copilot. And, for example, and I would say not unexpected, but it's good to see it in a data-driven way, is, people are obviously much more conversational as they're looking for things that make queries meaningfully more complex, but also more natural. So instead of in the past
Yeah.
with traditional search where it's like, okay, I'm looking for a product, where can I get this product? Now it's supporting an engagement that says, I sort of know what I want, what's out there, how does it apply to my exact situation, how might I think about this? And so the result in this shift in behavior is we're seeing a few things. Copilot queries are on average 3 times the length of traditional search queries, which is great.
That's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, you get into a conversation, and I would say, if what you have is a really binary question, you don't really need to chat about it, right? Like if I want to know the hours for Fern Thai in downtown Bellevue, like I can just ask that in a traditional query. But if you're getting into a conversation about something that is more open-ended, it's also just this much more positive experience. It, of course, makes the request longer. Every word, every phrase can provide another signal that help us to create a more relevant response, of course. And the really interesting thing for advertisers is that what we're seeing is, as a result of using Copilot, it takes about half the time to reach a decision. And so the engagement is longer and more complex, but the data and value exchange is so much richer that it helps the person actually accelerate the consumer decision journey because it's all right there. And it wasn't like, oh, let me go, research over here, or go read a magazine, or go ask a friend. You can kind of continue to have that dialogue in the chat. So that's really interesting in terms of like, what does that mean as marketers think about, upper funnel versus lower funnel, the time that it takes. What does that mean in terms of investments from a media perspective? And then, the other thing that we're seeing is performance is very positive too. For the formats that we consistently deliver in this new experience, we're seeing promising performance relative to click-through rate. For example, text ads are reporting 1.8x higher click-through. Shopping ads are seeing 11% stronger click-through, along with improved dwell time, which is a metric that we use on, staying engaged. And dwell time is also a proxy for accuracy. And so, these are good pieces of data that say, okay, this is useful, and the advertiser is going to see useful outcome. And then the last thing that we've observed that I think is really important and interesting for advertisers is that users who are navigating away from our search experience via an ad click are sticking to the advertiser's site longer. So I think you can imply that they're readier, they're in a readier state to engage.
I mean, and that's all welcome news and numbers, I think, for advertisers, as the industry has been evolving and changing, and you've been at the forefront of seeing all that change. So that's really, I think, welcome news for a lot of people listening to this. I do want to talk a little bit about maybe how some of your teams internally, how are you guys using generative AI tools?
We are. We are using these tools in a lot of ways, I'm sure, as really every company is. But as you can imagine, within Microsoft, there's, sort of this massive effort to just infuse generative AI into every place that it could possibly make sense. And so we're using the technology to be more productive, more efficient, of course, to be more creative, to make the work people do a little more fun and rewarding. And so, it means basic things like using generative AI in productivity apps like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Teams. And I call that out as a first example because the efficiency and productivity coming from those core sort of apps is really, really remarkable. The amazing time savings that you can gain in preparing for a meeting, documenting what happened in a meeting, writing an email to a client, summarizing a meeting, just like the basics of being in the ads business. And so that's the first thing, is making sure our teams are well-versed and learning best practices that are specific to our space in how to use the tools that are readily available to us, and of course to to people worldwide. If I think about like an example in Teams, which this is, I'm late to every single meeting, at least 5 minutes, I would say, which is not something I'm very proud of. But,
well, you're very busy, so.
or I'm just really, really a slacker. But instead of I really hate getting to a meeting and, being like, oh, I'm so important. Can everybody stop and catch me up? And instead, I just ask to be caught up. And I get a very detailed readout, and I don't need anything from anyone. We can just move on with the meeting. So just even things like that, I should be selling Teams. Honestly, I'm so excited about it. So in addition to things like that, I mean, our teams are using AI to generate, drafts of social copy, blog posts, things of that nature. I think that's pretty common in the marketing world. People are figuring out how that works. People are using AI overall in writing prompts. And we're, I think, very excited about sort of the creativity copilot, if you will. Makes it faster, not only in general. I'm a writer. I love writing, and it makes me more succinct. For people my children are both dyslexic, for example, it makes writing something that people are more confident in. So I'd say there's this whole general thing about just business interaction. Testing our messages is so much faster from a marketing perspective. It's kind of like a brainstorming partner. And then if you think about like things, and these are all more marketing oriented, but like Copilot helping you with tone of voice. We're experimenting with inclusive prompt engineering, generating keywords, deciding if you're trying to communicate something about trust in a vertical like FinServe, how might we communicate that? So accelerating a lot of that creative process. We're also, of course, utilizing AI not only to enhance the quality of our products, but to enhance the level of service we're delivering to our customers.
Fantastic.
We built out an offering that we're using internally right now called Insights Navigator. It's our first sales enablement tool that really has generative AI at its core, and it's enabling our salespeople who are closest to the client to develop and utilize more advanced insights that typically would have had to gone to an advanced analytics person. So we can redeploy those people to even more interesting insights that are valuable for customers. So that's an example, I would say, of something that we're really, really interested in, because insights in a world of automation, insights will always be important and unique. Yeah. And so in this case, sellers can select from category insights, query insights, that unlocks things like behavioral trends, look backs at marketplace dynamics, deep dives into top queries, so lots of things that take time and that we can do much more quickly, improving the way that we engage with our clients. So these are just a few examples. There are also a bunch of examples in our support world, which I think is such a rich scenario for people in terms of finding support information more quickly, being able to, map types of issues to find trends more quickly, to bring that back to engineering to solve bugs. Like the support to engineering connection and the enablement of sales and support topics is rich. We have a lot going on there. So I could go on for days.
Yeah. I love it though. But so I think when we started talking, obviously we talked about how things have been moving super fast, right? It feels like change happens almost every week. So with generative AI changing so much, how do you see it improving the advertiser experience, especially on your platform?
Yeah. I mean, going back to some of the things I'd say that we've been testing on ourselves, we believe it's really all about better performance and efficiency and creative inspiration. And so Copilot in the Microsoft advertising platform is a good example of improving the advertiser experience. And, I mentioned earlier, especially when you consider small or medium-sized businesses who are like, just get me my results. I have a business to run. Knowing these customers are time-starved, we're really looking for ways to make them more efficient, more effective, while still being able to build relationships with them and enabling them to build relationship with their customers. And so we have a really big effort around overall client engagement with the platforms and specifically SMB client engagement. A couple things, Copilot in the Microsoft advertising platform really combines the power of natural language conversations and generative AI to simplify and enhance experiences through like many aspects of the campaign creative process, recommending content, images, being able to optimize those images. So that whole thing is, we think, just a really important body of work. And if you connect that to what I was sharing about the retail media creative studio, which is a more specific instantiation of using generative AI around the creative process where we're getting such positive feedback, we really believe that the creative space is really rich for improving the efficiency and effectiveness with which advertisers engage, and specifically with our platform. And then the last, I guess, color commentary I could share is that we're really moving to multimodal. So moving beyond sort of text to text. Now you can put a text prompt in, but get an image based on the description. You can put that straight into your campaigns. We're fast entering the world of intersectional generative AI, where, the input could be anything really, like voice, image, text, music, and then the output could be anything. And so, of course, all these things are cool and fun and, got my kids' attention and I love to play with them. But the outcomes for advertisers are really quite remarkable. And the outcomes, for agencies who are serving brands are quite remarkable in terms of changing their ability to sort of engage in the creative process. And if you think about the publisher space, which is changing so much, the opportunity to continue to focus on creating great content and great consumer experiences by being more effective and monetizing in a more effective way, like it's pretty damn exciting.
It sure is. No, I mean, I'm excited just listening to all the things that you guys are working on and how you're helping, advertisers and publishers and even, consumers. So the AIQ podcast, one of the things that we're asking every guest is to give us some best practices, right? Or golden nuggets for people to up-level their AIQ, hence the name of the podcast. So are there any tips or best practices you can share for advertisers who are just getting started with generative AI?
Yeah, I'll say a few things, and I'll start with the most basic, which is use it yourself. Like, it's big. It's depending on who you are and where you are. It might be scary. It's exciting, but it's also the most remarkably practical set of tools that you can possibly get your hands on. And so I always tell people, like, if you're not using this in your day-to-day, you need to start. And so that's my starting point. But if you want to get engaged, making sure that you're really comfortable with what's happening with your data. So you can just use it yourself in Teams or PowerPoint or on Bing or wherever. But if you're really going to start using AI to build tools for yourself, build tools internally, we definitely recommend really understanding what's happening with your data. I mentioned earlier our position that your data is your data. We don't train our models on that data, and that's something that you should know and understand. Make sure that your teams are leaning in. How are you providing training and resources? People's experience with AI may be writing a paper last year when they were in college, or it may be, playing with it with their family, or it may be something serious at work that's really driving efficiency. What do you feel that everyone needs to consistently know? And what tools should they have at their fingertips? And this is something that, even internally, we are constantly looking at, like, how are we pacing people with learning and understanding the resources available to them? Issuing, I'd say, a little bit of a challenge, because people are going to run the gamut on how they feel about AI. Is it going to take my job? Is it going to enable me to have the coolest job ever? Like, people are on all across the spectrum. One of the things that we've started to do, and I'd say across Microsoft, but certainly within Microsoft Advertising, is asking our employees to start thinking about any activity that they do and asking themselves, could this be done more efficiently and more effectively with Copilot? asking ourselves really like, okay, I do this function, this task, have this engagement every day. Is this something that could be improved? And if the answer is no, great, move on. If the answer is yes, great. Who's going to look at it? Is this big enough for us to put a big effort around it? Is there another team that's already solving this problem? Having AI be like a special project that only super special people participate in is not the path. And AI, I think our position really is with our clients is like AI should be for everyone. What, how, of course, is going to be different. So that's a best practice that we're using. And of course, if you're not, as an advertiser, already thinking about what this means for your customers, whoever they may be, and how their behaviors are going to be changing, that is a super important thing to be doing. How can you use these tools to create new engagement opportunities? How do you start to imagine the possibilities and even rethink your advertising approach based on things like, I mentioned earlier, the evolving and shorter consumer decision journey? Like, what does that mean? Yeah. So I think everyone has to look across the full set of experiences that, you're having as a company in a given vertical, with your employees in a given function, across functions, with your customers. Everyone is going through this change, and getting on that path and being on that journey with your customers. Certainly for us, we have lots of ideas. Many of them I'm sure are great, but they are made really great by bringing feedback in from our clients.
It's amazing. And where do you see further opportunities to incorporate generative AI into your solutions? So, like, what can people expect to see in the next 6 to 12 months, if there's anything you can share?
Yeah, we're definitely just like beginning to scrape the surface of what's possible. I feel like every day there's an idea or a gap where you're like, oh my gosh, do we have enough time? Do we have enough people to do the great work that's out there? But we're learning fast, we're prioritizing, and we're learning from, as I mentioned, from clients and partners, what they're telling us, from the signals that we see in Copilot and Bing and what they're telling us. And we see a ton of opportunities to bring more AI-driven capabilities into this omnichannel, multi-format set of offerings and platforms. So I mentioned Copilot in the Microsoft advertising platform. We're also looking at how do we bring Copilot into our other key platforms, like in our Invest DSP, our Monetize SSP. I mentioned earlier that we launched the Retail Media Creative Studio within our Retail Media platform. We're definitely going to look at how do we make that type of technology available sort of wherever our advertisers and publishers are engaging from a creative perspective. So there's a certain amount that we're testing and learning in a discrete way where we'll then pull those learnings through all of the platforms where it makes sense, so that we can really create valuable offerings that are out there at scale. We're also continuing to drive a lot of innovation within our engineering organizations in terms of how do we bring AI to sort of more surfaces, more channels, more customer types. And so that's not super specific, but I think the main thing is like the way that I would probably wrap that up is that there are a million, billion, trillion problems I'm sure that AI can solve. And we love building things, and that's what we do. We are really working hard to ensure that we're putting our energy toward what we know is going to help our three core stakeholder groups: consumers, advertisers, and the agencies who support them, and publishers. That we're really focused on what we're trying to help them with, creating engaging experiences for consumers, driving efficiency and performance for advertisers, and creating great monetization opportunities for publishers. And then finding what works and doing it at scale as quickly as possible, so that we're making it easier to do business with us. And of course, easier for our clients and partners to run their own businesses. So, those are sort of the words to live by, and everything falls under that.
Well, and I think that's a great way to wrap up the interview. Kaya, thank you so much for being here. If folks want to follow you or learn more about Microsoft advertising, where can they go to find more information?
Well, they can follow me on LinkedIn. I'll try to say lots of interesting and funny posts to make it worthwhile, but definitely talk a lot about what we're doing in Microsoft advertising, inclusive of AI. And creating connections to what's happening in the industry and the rest of Microsoft. Of course, Microsoft advertising, you can, look for us on our website to learn more about what we're doing. Follow some of our blog channels where we really focus on bringing new information out to the market. I think any and all of those are great. And I would be honored to have you follow me.
All right. Well, thank you for being on AIQ.
Thank you so much, Cathy. And I really loved your earlier comment on being a chatty Cathy. I'm going to take that away as my most favorite thing for today.
There you go. I love it. I really enjoyed my interview with Kaya Sainsbury-Carter. I learned so much already from the work they are doing and how they're helping advertisers across the industry. And I can't help but walk away reinvigorated and actually excited about the landscape ahead for advertisers. I hope you've enjoyed the second episode of AIQ and that you've been able to level up in your knowledge. We'll be back next week with episode 3.
Are your ad campaigns lighting up the dashboard, but not the pipeline? That's bullspend, and marketers are calling it out in Dashboard Confessions.
My boss asked for results, so I opened my dashboard for the only positive-sounding metric I had: impressions.
Cut the bull spend. See revenue, not just reach. LinkedIn delivers the highest return on ad spend of major ad networks. Advertise on LinkedIn. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a $250 credit. Go to linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.